CloudDB, shaping your new normal.
Welcome everyone to the 2021 APAC Groundbreakers virtual tour by APAC OUC. This year our event would be the biggest one ever done with 144 sessions, including normal sessions, workshops, and hands-on labs from 100 different speakers over 17 days. Also, it would cover sessions in 4 different languages: English, Chinese, Korean, and Japanese. Since this is the last session, I'm not going to say please remember to register as many sessions as possible. So this is our closing session. I would like to say thanks to all Oracle user groups and Java user groups that made this event possible, and also to our main sponsors, Oracle Groundbreakers, and main sponsor, CloudDB. And now for this closing session, is it fixed in Oracle 23C, Insights into the Oracle Development Process, presented by Mike Dietrich and Daniel Hansen.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
And Mike and Daniel, over to you. Thanks.
Thank you. I just need to figure out. Okay, I hope my screen is sharing now.
It's sharing.
Thank you very much. Perfect. Thank you very much for having us today. That's quite a lot of days with a lot of cool content, and today let's finish with a blast and let's talk about all the internals of Oracle development and what happens from the second you hit an issue, a crash, to you can get a patch delivered and have a working database again. With me here today is Mike Dietrich, Distinguished Product Manager for Upgrades and Migrations. I don't think that Mike needs a lot of introduction. Mike is with me here today because to talk about insights into development, we need someone that have been with Oracle for many, many, many years. And that is true for Mike. So he knows all the inner workings, all the little knobs and turns that you have to twist in Oracle in order to get things progressing.
Yeah.
Over to you, Mike.
And with me today is Daniel. And I'm happy to present with Daniel because 2 years ago, he was on the customer side. So we can cover both aspects, the Oracle side and the customer side very well. And Daniel is our Senior Principal Product Manager for cloud migrations, but also for database upgrades and all topics around upgrades and migrations. And feel free also to follow Daniel on Twitter if you don't do already, DOH Database. And also his blog is very intense in terms of migration and auto upgrade posts. So dohdatabase.com is Daniel's blog. We have a ton of recorded seminars, and at the moment you find almost 20 hours of recorded technical seminars on our blogs. So feel free to tune in if you need more information. The session we'll give today is not available on the blogs, but it will made available via the APAC Groundbreakers pages afterwards for on-demand viewing, of course. Our blogs, mine on the left side, mikedietrich.de.com, Daniel's on the right side, dohdatabase.com. Feel free to visit and dig into a lot of internal stuff on our blogs. And let us start with a little bit of warm-up about release and patching strategy, because this is where it all starts when we talk about patching and upgrading. And first of all, a clarification. Since Oracle 19c, we have made a distinction between long-term support releases and innovation releases. So 19c is a long-term support release, while the next release, which is right now 21c, is just an innovation release. Long-term support release has 5 years of premier support followed by a minimum of 3 years extended support. Can be extended even further if needed, but at least 3 years, while an innovation release has only 2 years of premier support minimum and absolutely no extended support. So that means you please go from long-term support release to long-term support release. You all go to 19c now. And once the next long-term support release is out, you start your tests going to the next long-term support release, while an innovation release is meant for development purposes with new functionality, new features, but be aware that you need to certify your application later on the long-term support release again. This is the graph which matters and which decides all the rules. Right now, 11.204 is still under market-driven support, which is an extra cost thing for security and severity 1 bug fixes and patch bundles, and you get an ACS engineer helping you going to 19C. Be aware that 12.102 is going out of extended support in a few months, so end of July 2022, it will be just game over. And for 12.2, 18, and 19, we have a separate graph. Just be aware that extended support is usually an extra cost thing unless you have a ULA or a pooler agreement with Oracle. 12.201, this was the first release of the 12.2 family, and a lot of people moved there. And while we changed the release numbering after 12.2, calling 12.202 18C and 12.203 19C, still a lot of people stayed on 12.201. And for that reason, to allow us move to 19C, we added at no extra cost limited error correction support. So 12.201 limited error correction support goes until end of March 2022. That's from now on less than 4 months. So if you're on 12.201, it's now time over the holiday season to move to 19C. The last patch bundles will be available in January. 18C has no extended support because today we would call it an innovation release. And 19C, you see it in the graph, is the release you really need to go to because the premier support, which is included in all support contracts by default, is going on end of April 2024. So from now on, almost 2.5 years, and there is extended support available afterwards as well. While 21C, the innovation release, has a very short support time frame and no extended support. So for your production releases, that means you go from 19C to the next long-term support release, which most likely will be 23C, which should be available sometime in 2023. The dotted lines indicate that there is no dates known at the moment, and this is just fiction, but it most likely will be 23C. So 19C to 23C will be your next upgrades and migrations then. If you need to look up these numbers and dates afterwards, the MOS node noted down here 742060.1. We call it a single source of truth because it's all these states you can rely on. This is the MOS node you have to look up for all these specifications and dates. Then a quick sneak into patching, because since 12.201 we have release updates and revisions. Before that we had PSUs and bundle patches. There are no PSUs anymore, and bundle patches got a new name now called release updates. What does this mean? We have a base release, that's the dark bar here on the slide, and a quarter after release of the base release, we released the release update 1, RU1. And the RU1 contains security and regression fixes, but also a number of security fixes and maybe some functional fixes. A quarter later, 3 months later, release update 2 is released, and this includes all the fixes from release update 1, plus the new optimizer fixes off by default, the new functional fixes, those are marked in yellow here on the slide, plus the new security and regression fixes marked in black. Okay, at the same time, we release also a revision 1, release update revision 1, here tagged in red, and this is now based on release update 1, and it adds only the black bars, only the new security and regression fixes to it. 3 months later, now the slide becomes a bit more colorful and complicated. On the left side, you see we have now release update 3, which contains everything from release update 1 and 2, but for the release update 1 on the very right side of the slide, we release now the typically last and final revision 2. And for the release update 2 in the middle of the slide, we release now revision 1. And you would say, whoa, that's a lot of stuff. What should I do? Very, very simple. You stay strictly on the left side. You go with the release update track, and this is how you go forward, because this ensures that you have the most or the highest number of fixes. And release update revisions, they have some downsides, I would say. And you consume the release update and just later if you go to the revision. So our clear recommendation is you go with the RUs. And so I hand over to Daniel, because Daniel joined us from a customer and he can tell you now a real customer story.
Yes, that was a very good warm-up, Mike, but let's get into the gory details. And first, or the talk today will take the outset of a problem. So it's Monday morning, you come back after a good weekend, you sit next to the computer, open the terminal, start to use the database, and oh no, there's a problem. Something doesn't work as intended, there's a crash, there's a corruption, whatever. What do? Well, you open a service request, you start to work with support, and at worst case, you have hit a bug. Okay. But don't worry, after a little while, the supporter comes back and say, hey, don't worry, it's fixed in Oracle Database 23C. So it's Monday morning, you just have your coffee and you say, wait, what, like 2023 or Oracle Database 23 or whatever do I need to upgrade? But there is no 23, what happens? So let's look at the journey of your problem and see what happens at the individual parties, that is you, support, and development. So it's now time for some insights into the development process. Okay, first, when you hit an error or when something doesn't work as intended, you ideally report it via a service request in My Oracle Support. I know some of you has an alternate or found an alternate support channel, which is shouting on Twitter, which is also fine occasionally. But the official way is to use My Oracle Support and create a service request. As soon as you submit that service request, it is inspected by automation. There's a lot of automated processes that start to inspect your service request. Not only the text that you provide, but also the attachments, finding stack traces and so forth to see if we can match your problem to something that we already know. And had this been a live or an in-person event, we could have done a poll, but how many service requests do you think are solved by automation within one day? So what is the percentage of service requests where we can deliver a solution to you within one day when it's handled by automation? And the answer is 60%. I know that some of you are not that fortunate that your service requests take longer, and it's occasionally, or of course it happens, but actually for 60% of the service request, our automation is able to find a solution for you within one day. So I know that automation can be a pain from time to time, and sometimes it asks for things that are completely irrelevant. We need to make automation better, but please do understand that it does add a lot of benefit already. But in your case, Monday morning, you were not that lucky. The support engineer agrees that you found a bug in the database, and we need to create a bug. So this is where you can now help yourself, or you can help us help you by providing a very clear description of the problem. Imagine that the person in the other end in support, or perhaps later on in development, doesn't know anything about your environment, doesn't know the history of your database. So please provide us a clear description. If you can come up with a reproducible test case, that is very, very good. Provide all the logs, traces, dump files that you can get, health check, aura check, exit check. If you use auto upgrade, there's the zip option. Whatever you can supply us can help us. Also, if possible, you can try to patch the database to a higher release update to see if it has already been fixed, or even upgrade to a later version. That can also help us triage if we know that the problem is solved in a later version or release. Okay, now, there's a little lag here. Okay. Sometime we know that your service request doesn't get the attention that it truly deserves. And when that happens, you can escalate your service request. You can get management attention to kind of push things through. Again, here, some people prefer to shout on Twitter to get attention to a service request. That also works occasionally, but the right way is to follow the procedure, which is in the blog post that it's referenced here on the slide. You need to provide us with some information in order for us to put management attention. Go read the blog and you are better suited for when it happens the next time. In our case, in our imagined situation here, you provided us with a very good reproducible test case, and the developer could very quickly come up with a fix. Now that he has his fix in his own environment, he needs to create that fix also in what we call the main branch. We will talk about the main branch later on, but that is the first place where the developer has to put in his fix. The developer needs to verify the fix. Whenever he tries to submit something to the main branch, we will do a lot of regression tests on our farm in OCI. And the farm, that is just our fancy word for a lot of computers in OCI. When a developer is submitting a change in a given functional area, there is a subset of tests that has to be run before we can merge. And developer can also cherry pick each individual test if he thinks that there are some tests that are important to run on this fix. At the end of the day, we will run all our functional tests on the current state of the main branch. We have around 1 million functional tests, and the overall runtime of all those functional tests is 25,000 hours. So since we do these daily, you can do the math and divide by 24 hours. And you can see that we have quite a lot of computers running more or less all the time running our regression tests. Okay, if there is a problem in the fix, if one of the regression tests comes out with an error, then the developer will not be able to merge his code into the main branch until that issue has been solved. We don't want any dirty fixes into our main branch. So the developer can only merge code into the main code branch if all the regression test or the subset of regression test runs fine. Good. This is the main code branch. That's the upper arrow. At one point in time, way back in 2018-19-ish, we created a branch of the main branch, which then later on became the 19C release. We did that again just before we released Oracle Database 21. We created a new branch, which was then released to you as Oracle Database 21. And later on in the future, when we will need to prepare for shipping Oracle Database 23, we will create a new branch of the main branch, which we can then ship to you. All new functionality is developed in the main branch, and then when it's time to ship the product to you, we then create a branch of the main branch, which we can then use for shipping. We are currently in between Oracle Database 21 and 23. This is if a developer were to create a new fix today and merge that into main, we would be between 21 and 23. The next possible release for you to get this fix, if we created it today, would be Oracle Database 23. And that is why on the bug node in support, if you look at your bug, you can see that it's fixed in product version 23.1. So when a developer creates a fix today, it'll go into the next branch that we will release, and that is currently Oracle Database 23. And that is why you get that message that your bug has been fixed in 23.1. So,
yeah, Daniel, that's really good to know. But what does it mean to me? Do I need to upgrade now to 23C?
Yes, we love upgrades. We're the upgrade guys.
Oh,
we want everyone to...
I forgot, but can you tell me where can I download 23C right now? Huh?
Oh,
yeah. I see you. Man. We need to discuss that. So, what do we need now? The fix has been done in the main code line, but you are on 19.12, for instance. So what you need to request is now a backport. This is that fix, which had been fixed in the main code line in 23C, and now backported on top of your release update. This backport is not happening automatically, so you need to request it, or you need to talk to the support person via DSR and ask, okay, now I know this is a bug, it's fixed in 23C, please request that backport for me. It's very helpful and almost key that you upload at this point, if you haven't done already, your OPatch LS inventory, because we need to know exactly on which basis that backport needs to be built. So what happens is we have that black bubble here. The fix is merged into main, what Daniel showed you before. And now this fix needs to be provided as a backport on top of 1912, on top of the release update you are based on. This backport automatically will be built in an ideal case. So an automation builds it. And if the automation builds it, all goes fine because it runs the automated tests and everything, and then it uploads it automatically to Aro, and then you can download it via My Oracle Support. But if the automation can't complete it, then manual processing is needed. That could be reasons because of conflicts or some dependencies. And then a developer has to go into the code and build the backport manually for you. It needs to be queued because you can be sure the developer has not only just that backport in his or her queue, and therefore manual processing may postpone the delivery. And in some cases, this could be even weeks, unfortunately, while the automation usually delivers a backport in between 3 days. Now, when we look into such an example fix being available, you see here, this is the patch number 315 and so on, and you see there are already one-offs available. And in this case, it's even a general fix, so this most likely is just a SQL script which goes into RDBMS admin, and you find this for graph and spatial for 19.4, 19.6, and so on up to 19.12. Only 19.5 and 19.7 are missing. So in this case, it's very simple. You don't even have to request it. It's there already most likely. You download it and apply it. Very, very simple and easy thing. One of the reasons why we recommend the release updates over the RURs is you don't see that fix being provided for release update revision. And this is our experience. Very, very rarely you'll have the lucky situation that you have a one-off already been built on top of a RUR. While for the more important fixes happening more often, there are often the backports already available also for your platform on My Oracle Support. Yeah, but next question typically is, why is it not in the next release update? So you go in 1912 and then you hit this and you apply the one-off, the backport, and then you go to 1913 and you realize, oh, I need it again. I need to request it again. Why that? Why didn't Oracle include it into the RU? And the reason is there are some criteria for request for inclusion. So there's a list of fixes being supplied for inclusion into the next or the following RU. So we decide that. Not Daniel and myself, of course, but we have processes doing that and some people really going through the list of candidates. So we do a screening, a manual screening, and this is even way more important, we do an automated screening in the SR and the bug database. So we detect how many issues are hit by customers, how often. In addition, like you have that SR, you hit that issue, and you can ask your support consultant now via an SR, either a new SR or the existing one, say, okay, I have now the one-off on 1912, but is it so important for me? Please request the inclusion for a future release update. So support can do that, a request for inclusion. When you look now at I think one of the most important MOS notes, 555.1, this is the list of recommended fixes on top of a release update. So let's go in here and make it your favorite. So up in the left corner, you see the star being yellow now. If you click there, then it is in your favorites, and you can quickly access that MOS node via the selection new favorites on the MOS dashboard page. You see in that note here we do an example for 1911. So you will be on 1911, and now you check for the most important fixes on top. And you see there's a number, and we cut that list off certainly here. First of all, you see that 3 of these 5 are included in the next RU already. And this is why we always recommend going on the newest RU, because we include a lot of things already in the future RU. They're already there. So by taking a half-year-old RU, you miss a lot of fixes. And you may end up applying one-offs on top or even requesting them. if they're not available. So those often are available on top already, but maybe you're on AIX and then it isn't available, so you have to request it, whatever. But these are the important ones. Scan this node because some things may not apply to you. Like which one here, let's say you never use Armin or you don't use data pump, then the third or the fourth may not apply to you. So scan that. It doesn't mean necessarily that you have to apply all of them. In the bug database, this is happening in addition. We do also a screening and we check. And what's happening is you have this SR open and support now makes a connection between your SR and the bug number. Then make sure that on the top page of your SR, your customer view in the SR, that bug gets an entry into the bug field. Because if that happens, we make now an association between the SR database, the MOS system, and the bug database. And you see here the SRs tagged with that bug. So the bug count or the SR count is really important in the bug database, actually. So we count from MOS, but only if the engineer puts the bug number into your header of your service request. So if you want this connection, because this increases the count and it makes it like jump up in the list of candidates, that's really important to have this connection here. So this is very important. And then you may spot also in the top this AIM in the top list here on this page. What is that AIM? It's our automatic incident management. And AI has some other meaning here as well, because it's sort of artificial intelligence here, but it's our automatic incident management. What does it do? It mows through the bug database and it shares the information. It scans for incidents. And there's a team in development which now tries to identify with the list the AIM generates which fixes need to be included into the next RUs. And even more sophisticated, it automatically creates bugs also from the MOS system. So it does a lot of automation in the backend. It's not all manual, and we really try our best to include the most important fixes into the RUs. So make sure that your service request is associated with a bug, that you see it, then the counter ticks up in the bug database. That's very important from your side. And so we evaluate now. We have a long list, maybe 5,000 fixes in theory for the next RU, and we won't include 5,000. That's too much. And we have strict rules which apply here. So it must be always rug rolling and it must be standby first patchable. If a fix, like the data pump fix we've seen before, which is not rug rolling, unfortunately, because it changes the data pump's API, and changing the API means it's not rug rolling, that it can't be included, then it will be carried forward, unfortunately. So check the README. Check the README of the fix, and here in the README you see these lines here. This is not rug rolling installable, and this is not standby first, and this means this fix unfortunately can be never included in an RU. It's just available on top of an RU, and when you go to the next RU you must request it again, unfortunately. So it will be never included. So then we have a limit of fixes we want to include. We can't include an unlimited number because we run all these regression tests. And if we include an unlimited number, we will never finish the regression tests. There's no way. So you have to cut, like in every software project as well. There's nothing different than that. And so we do a cut. What is the reality? You see here a graph about the number of fixes included in release updates, and we started pretty low, which is normal when a release is new. Not so many people use it. So we have 300 fixes on average for the first 3 months, and then we went up to 500 and slowed down a bit. But with 1910, you see a steep incline, and then 1911, over 1,000 fixes. In the old 10G days, we would have said this is a full patch set, actually. So now it's an RU, and the reason why so many are included here is that Andy Mendelson, Juan Loiza, our executive vice presidents, have heard the feedback from customers saying, hey, quality, we want an improvement in quality from the Oracle side. So Andy and Juan really made every developer stop working on new projects and just fixing things. And so the number increased so dramatically. This was not intended, and you'll see it goes down a little bit to a bit more normal levels. But this is also the reason why we always tell customers, take the most recent RU when you start your project and not 6 months old. And be open to bring in a new RU very close to the release process, because I started my career in Oracle support, and I can tell you there's nothing worse than you hit an issue as a customer and you open an SR and I tell you, oh, it's fixed in the most recent RU, and you are on a 6-month-old RU. Because if you would be on the most recent one, that issue would have never hit you anymore, and you would have avoided that problem or outage or whatever. So try to take the most recent one. It's really important. And there's another limitation here, which is also norm for software projects. At some point, you have a code freeze. And let's say the next RU is coming around January 20 in a few weeks, then we can't include new fixes on January 17. That doesn't work, actually, because we have these massive regression tests. So we have a code freeze state, and this is 6 to 12 weeks before the actual release. So I can tell you that a code freeze for 1914 had already happened right now while we talk here. If I want to include something, there's still an escalation process for a late regression to bring in for something really, really important at last minute. But this is very, very strictly limited. Normally, if you have an SR now and a bug and you want to include it, it won't come in 1914. It then will be available maybe in the April one, the next one. So this is also something to consider. And again, we run really a massive number of tests with these release updates and also with the revisions. And this is also why we have to have this code freeze, in order to allow the regression tests to really complete and allow us also, if we find something in the regression test, and believe it, that happens from time to time, to fix these things. Yeah, and I see Daniel pulling out the baseball bat already.
Yes, is that it?
I'm scared.
No, don't be, because you gave me a fix. The developer fixed the problem. You promised that it'll be included in sometime, somewhere. So how can I get that patch? We need to talk about that. So not only have you provided me with a fix, possibly it will come in a later release update. How can I get it? So in order for you to get that fix into your database, into your Oracle Home, you need to use a patch. That is how we deliver fixes into your current Oracle Home. We can deliver fixes in 4 different ways. The most basic one, or the most common one, is a one-off patch. Some of those that have been around Oracle for many, many years, some of the Oracle dinosaurs might call them interim patches, but the official term is a one-off patch. So this is a single bug fix that we deliver to you in a one-off patch that you can then put on top of a base release or a release update or release update revision. The backport, that is a fix that is made in a newer code line, most of the time always in the main code branch, and we can then take that fix and put it on top of a previous branch so we can get it out to you. We also have the merge patch, which we will talk about a little later as well. Multiple one-off patches we can supply to you in one patch file that we can use in case there are any conflicts between the various patches. And then we have the bundle patches that we nowadays call release update or release update revisions. Previously, it could be patch set updates, bundle patches, proactive bundle patches, Exadata bundle patch. A lot of names. They are cumulative, so you can add newer bundle patches on top of the previous one and you won't miss out on any patches. We always include everything from before. And our promise to you is that all the bundle patches, release update revisions are always rack rolling installable and standby first installable. That is very important for us, because Oracle database, you can always patch an Oracle database without any downtime if you have a rack database, or with very, very little downtime if you have a data guard environment. But in order to promise that to you, we only include fixes that are standby first installable or rack rolling. So now that we have a patch for you, what is in the patch? Basically, there are 2 things. There are files which could be new executables, libraries, or files. Oracle or SRV-CTL. If we have time zone patches, it's the individual time zone files. It could be new scripts in the RDBMS admin folder, or basically whatever you can put into an Oracle home, including SQL or PL SQL changes. So not only do we need to change things in the Oracle home itself in the binaries, but we might also need to change something inside the database. We might need to make data dictionary changes. For instance, adding an index to tab dollar, or making changes to the scheduler API, doing changes to the DBMS scheduler package, and so forth. And those changes come via SQL or PL SQL. If you look in Oracle Home in the OPatch directory, there are two things that are important when we talk about applying patches. We have OPatch and also OPatch Auto, which is for RAG environments, but we're going to focus on OPatch today only. And then we have Data Patch. The first thing that you need to do is to use OPatch to apply the binary changes to the Oracle Home. So now with OPatch, you can replace the files inside the Oracle Home. Since we are messing with the files in the Oracle Home, it means that all instances, databases, listeners, and so forth that are running in that Oracle Home must be shut down while we do the patching. So imagine that we need to make changes to the main Oracle executable. Obviously, we need to shut down the database in order to change such vital libraries. So OPatch, bring the database in, listener, and so forth down, and then we can make changes to the Oracle Home. After that, we use Data Patch to apply the SQL and PL SQL changes inside the database. And since we need to make changes inside the database, it also means that we have to have the database running. So after OPatch, you bring up the databases, and then you can use Data Patch to apply those changes to the data dictionary. It is key to note here that when you use Data Patch, you can just bring up the database in normal mode. Sometimes when we talk to customers, they think that they need to have the database in upgrade mode in order to use Data Patch, but that is not the case. Just bring it up in normal mode, and it'll save you the restart that you have to do in order to take the database out of upgrade mode. The patches that we deliver to you can be either generic or port specific. A generic patch is something that works for all the platforms, Linux, Windows, AIX, what have you not. The files that we deliver to you there are then platform independent. And examples of things that are platform independent are the time zone patches. They look exactly the same regardless of which platform you're on. It could also be scripts in RDBMS admin, the SQL scripts or PL SQL scripts. They look the same in each of the platforms. And then we have port specific or platform specific patches. Now, this is something that works specific for one platform. And my favorite example for that is Oracle.exe on Windows. That is a very clear example of something that is port specific. You cannot use Oracle.exe on any other platform. If you look in my Oracle support, there's a column called platform. And here you can clearly see whether something is generic or it's port specific. Okay. If you have created a service request in my Oracle support, I bet that you have come out in a situation where the supporter asks you for the output of OPatch LS inventory. And why do we ask you for that? And the very short answer is to avoid conflicts. And what do we mean by conflicts? It is not a conflict between you and the supporter or you or Moss management. No, it's conflicts in the code. And let me illustrate that with an example. Imagine you install Oracle Database 19c. You download the base release, which is 19.3, and you start to use Data Pump. The majority of the Data Pump functionality is stored in a file called dpload.sql, which is then loaded when you upgrade the database or you run catalog and so forth. There we have the Data Pump functionality. You start to use Data Pump and you hit an issue. You file a service request. We create a bug, developer create a fix, and we deliver that fix to you as a one-off on top of the base release. So you can now patch your Oracle home, and we do a change in dbload.sql, and in this case, we're changing the second line here. It could be that we are adding a procedure or changing a procedure in the file. Then you start to use data pump again, and it is not really your fortunate day because you hit another issue. Same again, and eventually we will supply you with another one-off patch, which we will create on top of the base release, Oracle Database 19c. So in this case, we need to change another line. That's the red line here, the fourth line. But when you install that file into your Oracle home, you are missing out the first change because the DP load was generated on top of the base release. So we have a conflict between those two versions of the file. Which one should you use in your environment? If you take the latter one, you're missing the change from the former and vice versa. And in this case, this is when we need the merge patch. Because if you have multiple changes to the same functional area, for instance, dpload.sql here, in order to give you both the fixes, we need to create a merge patch where we take both the changes from the two files and merge it into one that you can use to have the best, you could say, from both worlds. This is the mostly automated process, but for very complex functions, we might need a developer creating that merge patch for you. But hopefully it goes into automation and you can have it within a few days. So pro tip, when you create a service request, you might as well, from the beginning, attach the output of OPatch LS inventory to your service requests, because chances are, if we need to deliver something to you, a backport or one-off, whatever, we need to have that anyway. So just give it to us right away. And please give it a meaningful name when you attach it to your service request. I recommend OPatch_LS inventory.txt. That's a very good meaning name. And don't use any other creative naming standard that I've seen. OPTCH dot blah, 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 or alle meine Patches or text for OPatch or whatever. Please just name it OPatch LS inventory.txt. Please, that is what works the best for us.
Yeah,
and I'm on Windows.
Yeah, you are on Windows, right?
Yes.
And it's great fun to be on Windows. Yes, yes. I hear Daniel complaining here and there sometimes. And we all know that, and you know that as well, Windows is a bit different than our operating systems, but Oracle on Windows is also different. So due to the thread architecture of Windows and the services, things work a bit differently. And on our side, there are certain patch types which simply don't exist on Windows or only via a very special process. So normally there are no one-off patches. And backports are only delivered within bundle patches, but not as regular backports normally. Same applies to merge patches. We have the bundles, but they are called bundle patches on Windows. They are still quarterly, and they need to be rug rolling and standby first. They are cumulative. And you see here, there's a catch-22 here. What if a one-off patch is not rug rolling? Then we still can deliver that on Windows. So there are exceptions from that rule, but normally you only get bundle patches on Windows and no one-offs, with some exceptions. And this leads also to the situation that now we have to include a bit more into a Windows bundle patch because we couldn't deliver one-off patches beforehand. So the contents between a Windows BP and a database RU, a normal release update, is a bit different. Typically, the Windows bundle patch contains a bit more fixes than the RU delivered at the same period of time. And another side effect here is, and you may have seen this as well, if you wanted to download something for Windows, you see it's patching day. And then you want to download the most recent release update because you heard so from us and you followed our advice and our recommendation. So you go to the second most important node in MOS, the download assistant. You click on latest available Microsoft Windows patches, and there it is. You see the link 1912. And you click there, full of excitement, and then you get this message, details not found. And the first thought I had when I saw this was, oh, the link is broken. Link goes into Nirvana. And this is not the case. Because if we look at the same time in the patch delivery document or patch availability document, which gets released with every quarterly bundles, and then always under section 2.2, post-release patches, we find a list of patches which haven't been delivered at the date of the actual patch. So here we see that 1912, the Windows bundle patch, is on 13th of August, or was on 13th of August, which was like 3.5 weeks after the initial release of the Linux quarterly bundle, the July bundle. So it was delayed, and this is why you see this message, which is not very helpful. It better should tell you, oh, this is the date when you can expect it, and you know when you have to look the next time. Would be a bit more smarter, actually. So we know that Oracle on Windows is different, especially since the bundle patches on Windows, but also on other platforms such as AIX, are usually delayed quite a bit. And this is not always our fault. What we develop on Linux is our development platform. And just to explain the mechanism behind it, we develop on Linux, and then the code needs to be ported to the other platforms. So it needs to be ported to Spark, to Windows, until 19C to Intel Solaris. With 19C, last release of Oracle for Intel Solaris, that needs to be ported to IBM AIX, ZLinux, and to HPUX Itanium. For 21C, there is no release of Oracle 21C on Spark, AIX, and ZLinux. And that doesn't mean that we don't support these platforms anymore. All these platforms except Intel Solaris will be still available with 23C with the next long-term support release. But the innovation releases won't be available on Spark, AIX, and ZLinux, just in case you missed them. Yeah, now we went into our bug database, and we just summarize some of the platforms from our bug tracking system. And those of you who work a bit longer with Oracle may find some very, very old friends here, like Open Solaris, SCO, Unix, or Pyramid, Data General, Ncube, Sequent. So Oracle was a lot supported on a lot of these platforms, or we had products on these platforms. And today it got shrunk a little bit to a little smaller subset of operating systems where Oracle is supplied on and supported. And with that
information, I started
information,
with the Oracle database on Windows NT. That's my that's my cradle of
yeah, we had Novel NetWare. I started with Novel NetWare on university, actually. Oracle 7.0 on Novel. This is when the Connect Internal got introduced, by the way. It wasn't there in Oracle 6 before. I learned later by working on service requests and asking a customer to do a Connect Internal on Oracle 6. The customer said, there is no Connect Internal on Oracle 6. Okay, good. So you see, we have some experience on these platforms. And with that, we would like to finish here and thank you for your attention. And let us see, because we couldn't look into the chat.
We have a question here, Mike. So we know that the content of a release update and a bundle patch between Linux and Windows is different. But what about the release updates for Linux, AIX, and the other kind of similar platforms? Does the release update contain the same, let's say, between Linux and AIX?
Per norm, yes, except if you have a port-specific fix, which, for instance, happened only on AIX and is included into a release update. So yes, the content is the same, except for the port-specific fixes, which may be there in addition. No, short answer. Any other questions we have? I don't think so, right?
Yes. Does the management escalation to the SR process tie to the severity of the SR? Say only severity 1 service request can be escalated and so forth.
No.
And it's not related to the to the severity. It could also be that, for instance, you have a service request with a very important milestone coming up 2 months in advance. And if you know you need to patch and test your database, then even if it's not a severity 1, that it's very critical and your database is down right now, if you have a very important milestone, end of year processing or Black Friday or whatever coming up, you can still request management attention on a lower severity service request.
Yeah, but let me add here that I would strongly recommend that you first increase the severity and don't hesitate to increase it to CEF1. Just make sure you don't choose CEF1 24/7, because then the SR will travel the time zones, and usually you don't want that for very rare exceptions. And with the increase of severity, you basically show, like Daniel said, you have an important milestone, and don't hesitate to increase the severity to 1 and write it into the SR. That is really important, because think of a support engineer having now 50 open SRs in a queue. And by telling the person that you have that important milestone on Saturday in a week from now on, and you increase the severity to SEV1, and then you want management attention, and also write down your phone number, write down in which time frame you expect the management attention. Let's say like in between the next 8 hours or something like that. Then you help people, because you're not the only one, and they may need to justify now in which order they work on things. So tell us as much as possible to give us an insight into your situation. For you, it's really tough right now. You're under pressure. Explain that, because then you give the other side a chance to see in which situation you are. Just
thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I think just one quick question. Daniel mentioned there is a blog post about the management escalation format to the SR. Is it possible to share that?
When you download
yes.
the slides, and we can put it in chat.
Yes.
No problem.
Daniel is...
Let me see. Yeah, dohdatabase.com/slides. You will find the slides that we used today there. Download them, follow the link.
Yes, it's on the page where we talked about it as a link to a very important support blog post.
Excellent.
Okay, thank you very much, then.
Good.
Thank you very much.
I think we were the closing session.
Yeah, that's right. And thanks for your support. And I would like to thank you both from the user groups.
Thank you very
thanks
much.
Again.
You're welcome.
Everybody take care.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
CloudDB, shaping your new normal.